Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Space Engineers Plus Me, episode 13. I'm Enigmius, and today we're working on the Lemon Drop, our mining ship, our second mining ship. Our first mining ship didn't work. It had some problems. Our second mining ship might fare a little bit better, only time will tell. The goal for the end of this episode is to do something practical and useful with this ship. It may not be mining just yet, but it will involve something more than just leaving it on the deck where we're building it and running off to film the next episode. We'll see how it goes. Right now we need to get thrusters on the ship, so we're building a bit of a frame coming off the main mast, if you want to call it that. It makes sense to call it the mast. It's the structure that's leading up to the cockpit at the very top. I guess the cockpit having solar panels on top of it means the cockpit isn't at the very top. You get the idea. Let's not be too picky. We're building a frame. We're going to attach some thrusters to the frame. You can see we skipped ahead a little bit there because the thrusters require a lot of components, most specifically 144 motors and some large tubes. And large tubes and motors in that quantity take up a lot of space in your personal inventory. You can't carry enough materials to weld together too many thrusters all at once. So you weld what you can, then you grab some more materials, you come back, you weld some more, and you back and forth. It's a lot of back and forth just to get these thrusters on, but we've got 8 thrusters, and now we're going to put some gyroscopes on here. There was a bit of minor controversy about the gyroscope placement on the ore leach, the previous mining ship, because of the way we placed it. We had the gyroscopes attached to the drills. The drills were attached to pistons. The pistons were attached to other pistons, leading up to a connection to the ship. Now, I've just recently learned that the way pistons and rotors, for that matter, are put together, you have the piston section that connects to whatever it connects to, and then you've got the piston head, which is a different colored thing on the very end of the piston. The head is not considered to be connected to the piston. So anything you attach to the piston head will not be considered to be attached to whatever the main piston body is attached to. In other words, when we had these drills attached to the ship via pistons, it wasn't registering that the drills were actually attached to the ship. So when we had the gyroscopes attached to the drills, the gyroscopes weren't registering as being attached to the ship either, which is why they didn't show up in the HUD as being attached to the ship. It said that we had no gyroscopes. We actually had 4, but they weren't showing as attached to the ship. It raises a question of how much that impacted the reason for the snapping of pistons when the pistons break apart and the drills fall out of the ship and all those other funny things that were happening to the ore leach. But the key being, we did have gyroscopes attached in our mind to the ship somewhere, but the game said, we don't see any gyroscopes on this ship. Regardless, for this iteration, we do have gyroscopes. They are attached to the ship. They should work. We shouldn't have any problems in that regard, but we need more thrusters. You can see we're adding more thrusters. We built a larger frame to add more thrusters. I have to be very, very clear about something. If you're playing the game, either by yourself or on a server, with the thruster damage rule turned on, this configuration of thrusters will likely cause damage to your ship. I have the rule turned off because I see it as this specific rule being one of those things. It just restricts design freedom, design whatever. You have to give too much consideration to where you're putting the thrusters, and it kind of leaves you in a spot where you're not really building what you want to build. You're building something that is going to work without destroying itself in the process. When we need so many thrusters on a ship just to get lift, I don't really mind turning off the rules so that we can do what we want to do and not have to worry about the thrust stuff. That's the technical term, the thrust stuff coming out of the back of the thrusters, wrecking our ship. So after we got the thrusters in place, this is what happened. We decided to test the arms that we made that had the pistons that were going to actuate the landing gears so that the landing gears could come down and hold the ship. We put these big cube frames, you can see the big ones, underneath where the landing gears would come down so that we didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd get enough clearance. And then when we got everything set up, we went underneath and we removed the landing gear that was actually holding the ship, that single landing gear underneath in the middle of the drills. Not only did the ship fall on us and kill us, you could see all those drill heads came right down to the deck. When we came back after respawning, we found that all of the landing gears had snapped off. All of the pistons had snapped apart and or snapped off with the landing gears. You can see some pistons lying on the ground there. So we got rid of them all the pistons, all the landing gears, they're gone. We're not even going to use landing gears on this ship. I can't be bothered to dick around with it. And again, it's a question of learning how that whole grid system works with, one grid being detached from another grid, so things aren't technically attached. I have some ideas. I actually came up with some ideas that we're going to experiment with in the future, not necessarily even on an entire ship, just on something that we can muck about with to see if we can come up with a working system where landing gears move and retract and do things like that without all snapping off. So this is a practical thing that we're going to do. It takes a few minutes because it's a big ship and it's heavy and it's hard to kind of control accurately. But we're going to dock our ship now with our base so that we can charge up the batteries and we can get ready for the next stage, which is a little bit of math. I don't think I'm going to bore you guys too much with it. We'll go over exactly what I was doing without necessarily going over the numbers themselves in explicit detail. But the whole idea is get the batteries charged up, figure out how much power output we need to accommodate in order to have a minimum of 24 thrusters and all of the drills running at the same time, and then see if we can't accommodate that with the number of batteries that we have on the ship. Once we have all those batteries on the ship and they're fully charged from the station, we can take it out and we can actually do some mining, which will be fantastic because it's still very viable for us to take our little cargo helper down to our favorite mining spot and dig things up manually. But I'm really, really enthusiastic to see how much ore we're going to be able to jam into the cargo containers on this ship when we come over a big ore seam and just kind of drop right onto it with all the drills going and just go to town until there's nothing left to gather. I'm very, very curious to see it. So we have this process here, which I actually quite like. Trying to line up the connectors. We've got a connector on the ship and we've got a connector on the end of that little stick coming on this side of our base. I'm full of technical terms today. That's the official technical term is the stick with the connector on the end of it. We have to line them up very, very closely. When they're close enough, they'll create a kind of like a magnetic pull. They'll pull each other together and then we can lock them together and we can turn off all the thrusters. And we can transfer cargo and fuel, and if we had room for it, hydrogen and oxygen back and forth between the ship and the station. I specifically designed this stick with the connector on the end of it so that we could dock a ship like this. It's a fairly large ship. I wanted to make sure that wherever we were connecting to the station, we were far enough away from... the game calls it a station. We're far enough away from our outpost that we could maneuver a large ship near it, and if we had an error of some sort, we ran out of power, there was a glitch, there was a hiccup somewhere along the lines, that we wouldn't take a giant chunk out of our base in the process of trying to correct the situation and losing control. Very helpful that we've learned how to change the perspective of the camera when we're in this third-person view. Just hold down Alt and move the mouse and we can get a slightly different angle, which is very important when we're trying to line up, because if you look at it now, they look like they're kind of close. But if we kind of release the view and go off a little bit to the side and take a look at things, we'll realize we've still got a little ways to go. So we'll do that momentarily after this little docking episode. See, there we go. Rotate around. We weren't that close. We were close, but not as close as we might have thought we were based on how things look. So we do a little bit of jiggling around and then lower it down. And you can see, as soon as we got close enough, it pulled a little bit faster. And now we're ready to dock. We can lock everything in place. Bob's your uncle. Turn off the thrusters. Turn the thrusters back on. Only so much we can do. So you get to see us turning everything off, and then we're going to go take a look at what we can do in and around the base to kind of make this a little bit easier to get from our ship into the base from this little umbilical that's sticking out the side of the mountain. I'll let you watch that in peace. We'll turn up the music a little bit. You can see the changes that we made. The ship is going to stay here while we figure out how many batteries we need to make everything work. And then the next episode, we'll go over that briefly, and then we'll go out and we'll look for some things that we can dig out of the ground. So I hope it's going to work. We'll find out. If you want to be notified about that episode, you can subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information box below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.